How does this med student at UT's Dell Medical School combine his business background, concern about food insecurity, and medical school? Listen in and find out.
Welcome to Admission Straight Talk, the podcast dedicated to graduate admissions and helping you approach the application process thoughtfully and successfully. Your host is Accepted's founder and world-renowned admissions guru, Linda Abraham. At Accepted, our mission is to get you to that unforgettable moment when you read your acceptance email and shout, "Yes, I'm in!" Confident you'll be attending the perfect program to help you launch the career of your dreams.
Welcome to the 379th episode of Admission Straight Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. Are you ready to apply to your dream schools? Are you competitive at your target programs? Accepted's free med school admissions calculator can give you a quick reality check. Just go to accepted.com/379quiz, complete the quiz, and you'll not only get an assessment, but tips on how to improve your chances of acceptance. Again, use the calculator at accepted.com/379quiz to obtain your free assessment. Our guest today is Zack Timmons. Zack is a fourth-year medical student at Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin. He's also the co-founder and CEO of Good Apple, an Austin-based produce delivery company on a mission to end food insecurity. Since launching Good Apple in November 2019 as a third-year medical student, Zack and his team have delivered over 540,000 pounds of healthy food directly to the doors of over 17,000 people facing food insecurity. Prior to medical school, Zack attended Rice University, where he studied the cognitive sciences and was pre-med, and later worked for 2 years as a business analyst at Deloitte Consulting. He plans to pursue an emergency medicine residency, where he hopes to leverage his patients' stories in the emergency room to continue building programs and organizations to meet the health needs of our community's most vulnerable residents. Zack, welcome to Admission Straight Talk.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
My pleasure. Can you tell us a bit about your background outside of medicine, where you grew up? What do you like to do for fun?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for having me. So I grew up in Waco, Texas, a small town actually just outside of Waco called Robinson, Texas, and lived there with my younger sister and my two parents who are a huge influence on my life. My dad is a commercial tire salesman, and my mom's a social worker. And I think they've, just really instilled the importance of, getting to know people and service in the community. So they're a huge influence on me. But yeah, I grew up in Central Texas and, always really enjoyed the outdoors. I think that's something I still enjoy today, from downhill skiing to long distance backpacking.
Wow.
Most recently, my partner and I completed about 300 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail in California.
Whoa.
So yeah. And then, cooking is also a huge hobby. So I spent a little bit of time in the Northeast prior to medical school and got to know Mark Vetri, who's an incredible pasta chef in Philadelphia. And so have recently been making a lot of homemade pasta, which is great.
Sounds good. I haven't done overnight backpacking, but my husband and I, my family, my parents, all of the Sierras. So we hike short stretches of the John Muir Trail, but nothing too major.
Oh, it's on my list. So incredible place, I've heard. So
yeah. Okay, let's go back to medical school and admissions. When did you decide to become a doctor?
Yeah, I think probably when I was a senior in high school, I kind of made that decision that I was at least interested in medicine. And, I will say one thing is that my passions for medicine have definitely changed and matured, the more I get to know the field. I think there are so many reasons to be excited about healthcare today. But I think, initially started off was maybe a pretty typical story, was really interested in the sciences and loved the application in helping people. And that was kind of the initial impetus to my path. And, when I got to Rice University, where I went to undergrad, as you mentioned, I had this incredible opportunity to work as an emergency medicine technician. Actually gained my advanced certification through a course at Rice, which is really cool. And so did that for 3 years during undergrad, and, really always had a passion for emergency medicine. And, initially it was a lot around, I loved the pace of the field. I loved, the opportunity to make an immediate impact on patients' lives. But I think more recently, I've really appreciated like newer things about emergency medicine. The opportunities to solve some really complex clinical challenges. In emergency medicine, we
Yeah.
see a lot of undifferentiated patients, which is such an exciting thing to take care of. And then, more systems-based, I think we see a lot of the problems in the healthcare system, both medically and social problems, things like housing and education that really impact people's health. And so I think that's kind of my new passion in medicine, is how do we create these health centers that are also provide medical care.
So it sounds like, to me, like your decision to become a doctor was an evolution, really. It might have started with interest in the sciences in high school, but then it kind of was confirmed through your work as an EMT, which you did for 3 years. So it wasn't one epiphany. It was something that was ongoing and as you say, evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's something that is still evolving today. I think,
Makes
it's
sense.
such a vast field, and there's so many incredible ways to get involved in, making an impact in the community, both on, the individual patient level as well as the systems level, which is, kept the fire burning. So.
Okay. Now you were an EMT at while you were at Rice. You graduated Rice, and you spent 2 years as part of Deloitte Consulting. Was this part of your grand plan, or were you kind of just testing out your interest in business?
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of doesn't fit with the narrative you've given me so far.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think my biggest takeaway for any student is just to always be open to new experiences. And I think that's really hard, because I think, a lot of the path with medical school is pretty prescribed. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of a leap of faith to try out new things. And so, I've been fortunate that I feel like a lot of those have really influenced, the physician I want to be today. But, to your question, I actually had an incredible opportunity the summer before my senior year of college to live abroad in northern Argentina, where I worked with a small healthcare NGO. And I was just really struck by the work they did. It was a maternal and pediatric center. And they had, a pediatrician and OBGYN, so they were providing medical care, but they also provided, things like after school education, and were really actively involved in the small 3,000 person community they worked in, and making sure people had economic stability. And it was the first idea I'd thought about, physicians playing this role bigger than just providing healthcare. And so actually came back from that summer super fired up about more of the systems thinking. And one of my friends, good friends, had just finished up a consulting internship and said, hey, I think a lot of these same skills that I worked on over the summer are applicable to some of the issues that you're interested in solving. And so really kind of on a whim, like started learning more about consulting and just really wanted to gain that skill set. And that's, the rest is kind of history from there.
So when you took the job with Deloitte, were you thinking this might be the path for me, or were you thinking I want to acquire this experience before I go to medical school?
Yeah, I think I was trying to stay open to the opportunities. I think, as a former EMT, patient care is just some of the most rewarding work that I've probably ever done in my life. And so I knew it was going to be, I think, pretty hard to sway me away from like not going back to medical school. But I wanted to have that open mindset, and explore and be curious. And so I think ultimately I kind of knew that I wanted to go back to med school, but, learned so much at Deloitte Consulting, and it really influenced kind of the physician that I want to be today, and the things I'm even able to do, because I learned so many skills that, maybe I wouldn't have had the opportunity to build in med school. So
In what sense do you see yourself being a different physician because you worked at Deloitte?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, and I think this is something, all of us as medical students and future physicians are going to have to grapple with. There's so many big problems in healthcare that, influence the physician-patient relationship that have nothing to do with the moment of being in that exam room. And so, I think physicians are really well positioned to solve those problems, but we have to have an understanding of the frameworks to do that. And so I think, understanding, not only the language of the business of healthcare, but also just understanding how you take big, hard problems and break them into smaller problems that you can solve. I think that was probably the overarching skill that I learned, and, the types of things that I'm hoping to work on as a future emergency medicine physician. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back about 4 years. You were not a medical school student. You were a medical school applicant. What was the
Yeah.
hardest part of the med school application process for you?
Wow. Yeah. And I will just say it is probably one of the hardest application processes I've ever been through. And I think it's really because it's such a marathon. I go back to when I was applying to consulting positions as a senior in college, and I applied for the role on Monday. We had first round interviews on Tuesday, second round interviews on Thursday, and by Friday, we knew if we had a job or not. And so, it was great. Yeah. But med school applications are not like that, and I think for good reason. I think they're there's a lot of pros to being able to have that additional time to reflect and writing personal statements and really kind of understanding who you are as a candidate and why you wanted to embark on this, very difficult journey, a long journey. So I think that was like the hardest part for me, was just the fact that there's so much time between the time that you start and the time that you kind of find out at the end. And, I'd say the second thing is it is like a pretty emotionally draining process at sometimes. I think you're having to answer big questions of, why do you want to commit your life to a certain path? And, I know coming out of undergrad as a senior, I don't know that I had those answers. And I think that was actually something that I came to through my consulting experience and time off, was that it was okay that I didn't have those answers. Right. But I needed to have that experience to really understand, who I was and what I wanted. And so, I think it's just it is a challenging application process, but also one that I think is super rewarding and, I think does the right thing for students. So
how did you handle, right? So when you applied, you were already a consultant, right?
That's right. Yeah.
How did you handle the demands? Obviously you were working full time and in a fairly demanding field too. How did you handle the work, the sheer work, the waiting, the emotional drain?
Yeah.
Anything that you did that you found helpful?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I had a very, very unique experience because at the time I was actually working abroad in Ireland as well. And so it's so funny. I was actually, I was doing all my I was, working all week, and then I'd come, I was living in Dublin on the weekends. And so I would go over, I remember, my desk and the Trinity College library that I was working in there in Dublin. And I would just sit there and write. And it was so hard because, like I said, it's such an emotionally taxing process of getting the essays in and writing your personal statement and doing your secondaries and making sure that your CV is spotless. But, I think a big tip that I would have for people, I was very fortunate that I was also going through the process with my partner as well. And so, having a team around you or someone who understands or maybe is applying with you at the same time, just to have that accountability and have someone who really, understands the difficulty of the process was invaluable for me then. So.
All right, great. Was your partner also accepted?
She was, yeah. We actually are both fourth year medical students here at Dell. So,
that's nice. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes,
and then what do you like best about the Dell Medical School?
Oh, wow. Well, I mentioned it earlier. I think a really important thing, we were kind of talking about the application process. And I think this was definitely something stressed to me during my consulting interviews, but maybe is just now starting to become expressed in the medical application process. But I think it's really important to not only show your fit with the program, but see if that program is a good fit for you. Oh, yeah. I think that's a really undervalued piece of the application process. And, I think as, pre-medical students, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions and try to figure out what these institutions stand for and make sure that those, mission statements really align with the type of physician that you're hoping to be. And so, when I thought a lot about that, Dell Med just kind of checked all the boxes for me, and I was really excited to come here. I think just a little bit of background on Dell Medical School. So the taxpayers in Travis County, which is where Austin is, actually voted to raise the property taxes to fund a good portion of the medical school, which is pretty much unheard of. And it was going to be the first medical school at a Tier 1 research institute in over 50 years. So it was this huge community investment to bring the school here and even make it possible But because of that, we have a very kind of direct mission to give back and serve the community here in Austin. And that was something that was really powerful to me. It provided like a very clear direction for the goals that the med school hoped to achieve. And so that's been super reflected in my experience as well. During our first week of school, we not only learn about biochemistry and biostatistics, but we also learn about the social drivers of health and how those affect people here in Austin. So things like institutional and systemic racism. Austin unfortunately has a difficult history with that, and many of those issues still present here today. But those are the things that were in our curriculum, and that the school felt like were important for us to learn. So I think those sorts of things, coupled with the fact that our curriculum itself is pretty innovative. We actually have an entire third year off to pursue a community project or special passion, which I think is pretty differentiating.
Doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so
again, just a minute, we're getting there.
But I think those things all combined, it was just a program where I really felt like I could have a truly like individualized experience that would allow me to kind of explore some of these interests that I had prior to medical school.
So you completed your didactic portion in 1 year or 1 year and a little bit, and then you started clinicals in your second year. Is that what happened?
That's correct. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
What could be improved at Dell?
Yeah, so I mean, it is definitely a startup vibe around here. We are constantly changing things, and so I think that creates a lot of uncertainty for students sometimes. I think especially as pre-med students, I think we're used to having a little bit more regimented schedule and maybe understanding of like how things will be. And so there is a little bit of that at Dell that you have to kind of be along for the ride and know that thankfully the administration here is just fantastic and understanding student feedback. But I think that's definitely been one of the challenges, is trying to kind of handle that ambiguity that comes with being at a new school. But just been really impressed with the leadership, Dean Johnston and Dr. Sue Cox, who are just legends in the field, but have created something super special here, which has been amazing to be a part of. So.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's get to the good apple. To good apple. Okay. Now that's your third year project. We now know that. How did you come to found it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick background, Good Apple, we're an Austin-based produce delivery service on a mission to end food insecurity. And for every box that a customer buys from us, we deliver another box of fresh food directly to a family in need. And so, talking about kind of those goals coming into Dell Med, we're really focused on the social drivers of health. So those things that affect people's health that are outside of the doctor's office, where they go to school, what sort of housing they live in, their access to healthy food. And I was really fortunate actually to take a course very early on in my education, again, kind of because of the flexibility in the curriculum here at the LBJ School of Public Policy. It was taught by Dr. Michael Hull, who has become one of my just most incredible mentors since I've been here at Dell Med. But it was called Solutions for America's Children in Poverty. And what we did was we kind of walked through all of those different social determinants of health and tried to understand, the history of them. And also at the end of the course had an opportunity to pair up with a community partner. So I worked for an entire semester with the Texas Hunger Initiative, which is a organization here in Texas that works on helping unlock certain federal programs for local communities. So ones that you may be familiar with are like the Free and Reduced Lunch Program, which is an incredible program, as well as the Summer Food Service Program. And so it was awesome to kind of get to work directly with an organization working on such important work. But I think I realized, it was the first time that I'd realized what an issue food insecurity was here in Austin. Even amid some of this incredible technology innovation we also have some of the highest rates of food insecurity in the country. Yeah, 1 in 6 people in Travis County, including over 50,000 children, are unsure where their next meal is coming from. And so for me, that was like just a staggering statistic, and something, knowing what we know about food insecurity and its impact on health outcomes was something I was really passionate about solving. So kind of had that foundation that I built up in first year, and then second year went back into the clinics and kind of similarly continued seeing issues where, I'm taking care of patients with diabetes, and, a core tenet is is diet. And unfortunately, for a lot of patients, it's hard to have access to healthy food. And so, came back to my third year and really wanted to work on this issue of food insecurity. And ultimately, after talking with a number of clients about, why was it that they were struggling with food insecurity? How could we help? I found that there are actually almost 60 food pantries in Austin alone, which is the most of any Texas city. So there was this kind of interesting disconnect between all of these amazing resources that were available and all of these people who were still struggling with food insecurity. And so, maybe not surprising when I talked with my patients, my clients, transportation barriers are huge to accessing fresh food, and just location where you live, as well as, a lot of food pantries have pretty limited hours. So, when I thought about that, if my grocery store was only open between 8 and 11 every second Thursday of the month, like that'd be very difficult to get food. So that's kind of how we ended up landing on Good Apple. We really wanted to focus in on this idea that, everyone deserves access to home delivered food, which is, I think, pretty radical and something we're really pushing for. I've been really excited to see some of the federal policies start to move that way as well, which is exciting. But that's what we've been doing to date, and it's been just really exciting work.
Did the focus on food delivery, did that predate COVID, or did that change things?
Yeah, so that predated COVID. So we launched the program in November 2019. And so we were continuing the one-for-one model, really kind of excited. We're seeing some good results from clients as far as acceptability and usability. And then about February timeframe, we were delivering somewhere between like 50 and 100 boxes a week to families in need, which was incredible. We were so excited about that. It really felt like we were making a difference. And then COVID hit, and we were just so uncertain with what was going to happen. I think you might be muted there, Linda.
I did for a moment. There's some noise outside. Yeah.
Okay. And we were just really uncertain with what was going to happen. And unfortunately, or fortunately, what we've seen is some incredible partnerships flourish around a time when the need for food access has also rapidly increased. So that was really exciting. We've kind of leveraged our existing knowledge and institutional understanding, and as well as partnered with different people across the city of Austin to really ramp up our programs. So like I said, we were doing between 50 to 100 deliveries, a week. At the beginning of February, by the end of March, we were doing over 1,200 a week. And yeah. So it was an incredible, team effort. I started Good Apple, but I have an incredible core team of 7 other people who helped me, including, former colleagues from undergrad, as well as other medical students. And, we've had so many partners across the city of Austin, including a local Capital Metro, our local transportation authority, the city of Austin, different food pantries in the area like Hope Food Pantry. So it's been cool to just see all these partners come together and really rally behind the program. And I think, to date, we've been able to make a pretty big impact on people's lives. So it's been exciting.
That's exciting. Well, it's wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. And basically the idea is that people buy, I guess, a box of fresh produce. The produce, you folks choose, right? You choose whatever produce you're putting in the box for that week.
That's right. Yeah, we work with local farmers each week to kind of curate a CSA or community style supported agriculture type box. So it's a curated list of veggies each week that are local and seasonal. And then we deliver those to our paying customers. And then those funds, as well as additional philanthropic funds, help us to fund the delivery of another box to a family in need. So.
Got it. Very exciting. And it's all delivered, right? There's no pickup, no.
All delivered. Yeah, absolutely. It was just really important to us that, knowing what we knew about the different transportation barriers and scheduling conflicts, especially for, our young working families, it can be
or the elderly challenge. At this point in time.
Exactly. Or the elderly, or people with underlying health conditions who, have risks just going to the grocery store to the virus. And so it's been great to have that delivery aspect for these people. So
Now, in your LinkedIn profile, you describe yourself as a former management consultant turned medical student with a passion for applying business principles to improve community health and wellness. Now, the good apple is great evidence of kind of using business to do something very, very powerful in the world and wonderful, and your passion as well. But any other ideas about applying business principles in medicine? I mean, you've done clinical, you want to go into the ER, you're clearly aware of the issues. What some other ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing I've learned, I think historically, business has kind of like a bad connotation in medicine, and I really want to try to change that. I think the core of any business is to unlock as much value as you possibly can.
Right.
And I think there's a huge opportunity, especially at the intersection of business and healthcare and social impact, to unlock as much value as we possibly can. And so, I think when I say business principles, I think the things I'm hoping to apply most in the healthcare space is this. I think there's kind of two different ways of thinking. Traditionally, especially as medical students and medical providers, there's a very high level of research and understanding that goes in prior to making any decisions in patient care, and rightfully so. We want to make sure that, if we're giving a patient a medication or having them undergo a procedure, that we're certain, or with as much certainty as possible, that that's going to improve health impacts for people. Do no harm first. And so I think that is an incredibly important way of thinking about health. But there are all these other problems in the healthcare system that are systems problems that could benefit from more of a business or startup perspective. And I think that perspective is let's create something and fail really fast, which is not something you want in patient care, but in the healthcare system, I think it's something we could try to adopt more. Let's build the minimum viable product that they talk a lot about in business. Let's build that first program, and let's get feedback from people and see what works, what doesn't work, and then we'll change it again, and we'll do that really rapidly. And I think we've started to see a lot more focus on that, especially around quality improvement in hospitals. Yes. And when we think about like PDSA cycles and stuff like that. So it's been exciting to see those start to come over, but I think that's my biggest excitement in kind of combining the two ways of thinking. I think they're very, very complementary. So
yeah, I have a relative actually who did his undergrad in engineering, became a physician, and has been applying like systems approaches that he'd learned as an undergrad in engineering to medical problems and massive, healthcare problems, in particular, preventive health.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, the other thing that's been really exciting, just something from my perspective, or maybe that I've just come to learn recently, is all the collaboration that can happen between medicine and other fields. You mentioned engineering, we've been talking about business. I think there's so many opportunities for physicians to have those kind of dual expertise, and I think that'll only enrich, the healthcare system and the health impacts that we're able to have for patients. So it's a really exciting time, I think, to be in medicine. Yeah,
it is. How did you handle the, I guess you weren't in medical school. How do you think maybe your fourth year of medical school is going to be different because of COVID?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually went back to the emergency department during June and did my acting internship there, had a really fantastic experience. There's definitely different precautions that we're taking now. I think we've always been pretty focused on, personal protective equipment, but there's definitely a heightened understanding of the needs with COVID-19. So that first and foremost, I think, is the biggest change I've seen. As a medical student, at least at our institution, there are also additional protections for students as far as the types of patients we're able to kind of come in contact with. And, I think those things will continue to become more refined as we learn more about the virus. And, it could be some time, but I think I've been really impressed with our institution, at least here, and being able to create still valuable experiences so that the learning doesn't stop. Because I think that's the other thing too, is that we're grappling with, especially in my position as a fourth year medical student, in less than a year, I'll be the one out there taking care of these patients. And so I think we have to kind of figure out the best way to start training the next generation to continue the work. But I think we're moving every day. And, again, I think medical education has been very responsive and very responsible, which I think is great in protecting medical students. So.
Well, that's great. Now, you mentioned earlier that you want to go into emergency medicine. You've done the emergency medicine rotation. Kind of what's the appeal of it?
Yeah. I think for me, I mentioned earlier, I worked as an emergency medicine technician for 3 years. And so I've always been very drawn to the pace of medicine. But I think, clinically, what it came down to for me was two things. I think one, just the opportunity to see undifferentiated patients from a just intellectual medicine perspective. That's something that I was very passionate about, diagnostic reasoning and differential diagnosis building. For me, that was the part of medicine that I really loved. And I think also just really loved a lot of the different rotations that I went through. And so the opportunity to see some of the emergency cases of those different specialties in the ED is very attractive. But I think also, and I've definitely seen this here at our own institution, that because of the shift type work of emergency medicine, there's also a lot of opportunity to get involved in projects outside of clinical work.
I was wondering if that was going to be one of your responses.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think they're very tied together for me. It's, it can be frustrating as a physician when you go in and you see the same problems day after day, and maybe you don't feel like you have a way to change them. But I really feel like, especially the field of emergency medicine, you have that time outside of the hospital to say, hey, I've seen this patient come in and, housing's a big issue for them. Like maybe that's something I could get involved with and advocate for, whether that's, political advocacy or building programs for those patients. I think you can really take those issues you see in the ED and action them even outside the clinical context, which is really exciting. So.
Okay. What would you have liked me to ask you?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it, but I think, it may be advice for people applying to medical school.
What advice do you have for people applying to medical school?
I think the advice I'd have for anyone, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but just being open to the process. It's such an emotionally taxing process, that, physical even at times. And, just being in tune with those emotions and the process and how it's making you feel, and, being okay if you have a bad day, or being really excited when you find a new opportunity. I think that whole process is really exciting. And I think, for me, one thing when I was applying back that I was able to kind of narrow in on is what's your passion? And I think, historically, maybe we felt like we needed to kind of check all these different boxes as pre-med students. But I think what I'm seeing more and more is medical schools want to, accept leaders in the field, and leaders in the field typically have a passion, and they have a deep passion. And so sometimes that means you don't do a lot of research in undergrad, but you've built out this incredible organization that does X, Y, Z. And so, don't be afraid to kind of break that mold a little bit. I think it's something that schools are really excited about now more than ever. So
that is great advice. I really want to thank you for sharing it. I've had the privilege of interviewing several medical students or recent medical school grads, and that is probably the most common piece of advice that they give, and the most common answer to this question. And it never makes it less relevant.
Absolutely.
Okay. I hope that listeners, especially regular listeners, kind of see a pattern here and really take it to heart, and realize they don't have to be on a treadmill. They don't have to have a check the box approach to life. It'll make them a less qualified medical student than, as you say, following your passions, developing your interests, and developing yourself in multiple ways. Yeah. So, thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you very much for sharing your whole story. Zack, I think we're just about out of time. Where can listeners learn more about Good Apple?
Yeah, I'd love for people to check it out. You can find us at goodappleFoods.com, or we're also in social media at Good Apple Foods.
Sounds good. Just one more question just occurred to me. Do you have people like calling you and inquiring about setting up a Good Apple somewhere else, or do you have any plans to grow it outside Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something we're definitely trying to figure out right now, like different operational plans and scalability. But yeah, that would be an incredible opportunity to, expand not only in Austin, but to other cities as well. I think there's a huge opportunity here. So we're excited about, helping as many people as we can. So.
Sounds great. Again, thank you very much. And we're going to link to Good Apple as well as to other resources related to this podcast from accepted.com/379. Listener, thank you too for joining Zack Timmons and me for Mission Straight Talk's 379th episode. I have a final reminder and a favor to ask of you. Don't miss the med school admissions quiz. Get an assessment of your readiness to apply and your competitiveness at your target schools. Take the quiz at accepted.com/379quiz today. And the favor, if you find the show worthwhile, please tell your friends about Admission Straight Talk. They'll thank you, and so do I. Thanks again for coming. This is Admission Straight Talk, produced by Accepted, and I'm your host, Linda Abraham. I'll talk to you again next week.